The November rain hammered against the windows of the mountain lodge like fists demanding entry. Giovanni Ferraro sat in his study, alone except for the blue glow of surveillance screens. 6 monitors displayed different angles of his stone house, hallways, staircases, the guest wing where he had installed her 3 weeks ago. His hand wrapped around a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light like liquid fire. On screen 3, a clock showed 2:27 a.m. The timestamp burned into the corner like a countdown. Elena Santos moved through his hallway in a charcoal coat, her worn orthopedic shoes silent against the marble floor. Her right hand clutched something in her pocket. A shape. A weight. Something she did not want him to see. This was the 5th time in 9 days. Giovanni leaned forward. His storm grey eyes, sharp as broken glass, tracked her movement. She glanced left, then right, checking the shadows for witnesses. For him. Then she slipped through the kitchen door and disappeared into the November darkness beyond. The screen went black where the exterior cameras could no longer follow. His office door opened without a knock. In 15 years, only 2 men had earned that privilege. Tony Moretti pushed through first, broad-shouldered, Italian silk shirt straining against muscle, a scar running from his left eye to his jawline like a blade had rewritten his face. Nino Russo followed, leaner, colder, his eyes the color of winter stone. "She's gone again," Tony said. Not a question. A statement delivered like a bullet. Giovanni did not turn from the screens. Nino crossed to the desk, his tailored suit, black wool worth $4,000, catching the light. "Want me to follow her tonight, boss? Find out where she goes? Who she meets?" The glass stopped halfway to Giovanni's lips. In his world, people kept secrets for exactly 3 reasons: money, betrayal, or death. Usually all 3 were connected. He had built an empire by understanding this fundamental truth about human nature. He had survived 43 years in a business where most men did not survive past 30 by learning to read the moment when loyalty turned to poison. And this woman was poisoned. "No," Giovanni said finally. His voice was deep and solid like an oath carved in stone. "I will follow her." Tony and Nino exchanged a look that lasted exactly 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, confusion flickered across both their faces. In 15 years of working for Giovanni Ferraro, they had never heard him express personal interest in surveillance. That was not how power worked in his world. Power delegated. Power sent others. Power did not follow anyone. "Boss, that's not," Tony began. "Not what?" Giovanni turned then. His eyes moved between them like a weapon sweeping across a field. "Not wise? Not our way? I did not ask for your blessing, Tony. I asked for nothing at all." The silence that followed was thick enough to smother. Nino withdrew toward the door. "Understood," he said quietly. Tony hesitated one breath longer, then followed. When they were gone, Giovanni returned to the screens. On monitor 4, he watched the empty hallway where she had been. The coat rack held 7 jackets. His security details. Hers. A small charcoal thing that hung like an afterthought among the expensive wool and Italian leather. 3 weeks ago, his world was simple. Violent, yes. Brutal, certainly. But simple. You gave orders. People obeyed or they disappeared. Money flowed in from the 5 boroughs. Territory was held through fear and careful alliances. His daughter, Sophia, lived in the master suite 2 floors above him, sheltered from the knowledge of what her father really was. Then a highway. Rain. A broken-down Honda. He had been returning from Atlantic City, the black convoy moving through the November downpour like something inevitable, when his driver pointed ahead. A woman stood beside the disabled car, arms wrapped around herself, shivering hard enough that Giovanni could see it from 50 yards away. Most men would have driven past. Giovanni had instructed the convoy to stop. She had looked up at the black SUVs, at the men in suits stepping out into the rain, and instead of fear, her face had shown only a hollow kind of resignation. As if she had been expecting death and was simply grateful it had finally arrived. That expression had fractured something inside him. She told him about Oliver. About the 7 days. About the $65,000 surgery he did not have and could not earn in a lifetime of double shifts at a diner, counting tips that amounted to quarters and dimes from people who could not see her either. She had told him she was nobody. Giovanni had brought her here. Now she was sneaking through his house at 2:56 a.m. with something hidden in her pocket, meeting people he did not know, telling lies that were so obvious he wondered if she even knew he was watching. In his experience, when someone began lying, they were preparing to betray you. The question was not whether she would. The question was when. He stood, moving to the window. The rain fell in sheets, erasing the world beyond the glass into a smear of grey and black. His reflection stared back at him from the pane, a man of 52 with silver creeping into his dark hair, a scar that ran along his neck like a rope someone had tried to tighten, an ice that had seen enough violence to fill an ocean. Somewhere out in that rain, Elena Santos was doing something that would force his hand. In his world, there were rules. Not written anywhere, but older than paper. More permanent than ink. If you discovered betrayal, you ended it. You did not hesitate. You did not question. You did not feel anything beyond the cold clarity of what needed to be done. He had ended 6 people in the last 2 years. He wondered if tonight would make it 7. The study door opened again. This time Sophia appeared, his daughter, 17 years old with her mother's dark eyes and her father's unforgiving intelligence. She wore a sleep shirt and bare feet, her hair tangled from sleep. "Dad." Her voice carried the confusion of a child who had woken from a nightmare. "I heard voices." Giovanni turned from the window. The surveillance screens reflected in his eyes, blue and cold and endless. For just a moment, he looked at his daughter and something shifted in his chest. A memory surfaced, uninvited and unwelcome. A crib. A different house. A smaller child who would never grow tall enough to reach his shoulder. He cut the thought off. "Go back to bed, Sophia," he said. She did not move. Instead, she looked past him at the screens, at the image of Elena's empty hallway, at the coat rack and the charcoal jacket hanging small and fragile among the expensive things. "Is she in trouble?" Sophia asked. Giovanni did not answer. "Dad. Is Elena in trouble?" "Everyone is in trouble," he said finally. "It is simply a matter of whether they understand it yet." Sophia wrapped her arms around herself. She was still half asleep, still vulnerable in the way that only happened in the middle of the night when defenses were lowered. "Oliver asked me today when his mom would take him home," she said quietly. "He doesn't understand why she leaves at night. He cried in his sleep. I heard him." Giovanni watched his daughter. She was taller now than when Elena and her son had arrived. In 3 weeks, Sophia had changed. She laughed more. She had stopped eating dinner alone. She had made a friend in the form of a 7-year-old boy who drew pictures in her sketchbook and called her by a name that meant big sister in a language Sophia did not speak but somehow understood. "Go to bed," he said again, but his voice was different this time. Softer. Like a man trying to soothe something wild and wounded. Sophia left. Her footsteps faded up the hallway. Giovanni returned to the screens. They showed him the empty kitchen. The garden gate. The rain falling straight down now, ending its assault on the windows. By morning, the November cold would harden everything. Ice would form on the stone paths. The world would be sharp and dangerous and frozen. He picked up his phone. His finger hovered over Tony's number. Then he stopped. Somewhere in this city, Elena Santos was doing something that felt important enough to break the rules. Important enough to risk discovery. Important enough to sacrifice her safety inside these walls. She was not simply running away. She was running toward something. And tonight, Giovanni Ferraro would follow her into the rain and find out what it was. He would discover the truth hidden in her pockets and her lies and the way she clutched her phone like it was the only anchor keeping her tethered to the world. What he did not know, as he reached for his coat, a cashmere thing worth more than her annual salary, was that someone else was also moving through the November night. Someone who had been watching Elena Santos far longer than 3 weeks. Someone with a name and a plan and a very particular kind of cruelty that required patience and precision and the kind of social demolition that left no fingerprints. By morning, everything would change. But first, there was rain. And in the rain, a man would follow a woman who was desperate enough to risk everything, and he would discover that the danger in his house was not what he thought it was at all. If this story is touching your heart, please drop a like and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Share this with someone you trust. Now let us go back to the beginning, to the night that changed everything. 8 months earlier. Philadelphia. A diner called Rosie's on the corner of 5th and Mercantile. Elena Santos stood at the order counter, her orthopedic shoes worn through at the heel, her apron stained with coffee and regret and the accumulated grime of 300 double shifts. Her name tag, plastic and faded, hung crooked at her collarbone. The clock showed 11:52 p.m. 8 minutes until her shift ended. 8 minutes until she could count her tips, leave the diner, and drive home to the apartment where her son Oliver would be sleeping, dreaming the safe dreams of children who did not yet understand that the world was collapsing. She did not yet know that her world was about to end. She did not yet know that in exactly 8 months, her life would be split into 2 halves, before the rain and after. In her pocket, she carried $34. This was all she had left. 8 months before that rain-soaked highway, before the black convoy and the tall man with storm-gray eyes, Elena Santos stood at the counter of Rose's diner in Philadelphia, wiping down the same stretch of laminate she had wiped down 300 times before. The clock showed 2:48 in the morning. The diner was empty except for a truck driver sleeping in booth 7, his coffee growing cold beside him. Elena's orthopedic shoes, the ones prescribed for her collapsed arches, the ones she could barely afford, were worn through at the heel. Her apron was stained with coffee and ketchup and the accumulated grime of 8 hours on the graveyard shift, a shift that paid minimum wage plus tips, and tips came slowly on nights like this, when the only customers were the desperate and the exhausted. She did not think about how tired she was. Thinking about tiredness made it worse. Instead, she counted tips in the back room. Dollar bills, crumpled and soft from being handled. Quarters and dimes dropped by people who had almost nothing themselves. She arranged them on the folding table, the same table where the managers did inventory, where broken coffee makers waited to be fixed, where the fluorescent light flickered like a dying heartbeat. $17. Then she found a $5 bill wedged under the register. $22 total from 8 hours of smiling at strangers, refilling coffee cups, clearing plates of half-eaten eggs and toast. Donna, the night manager, appeared in the doorway. She was 60-something, with bleached blonde hair and the kind of permanent frown that came from managing a diner for 23 years. She held a ledger in one hand and a cigarette behind her ear. "Register is short again," Donna said. Her voice was flat, final. $20. Elena's chest tightened. "I didn't make a mistake, Donna. I counted 3 times. Register is short. You work the register. That's how it works." Donna dropped a slip of paper on the table. "You're docked." Elena did not argue. She could not afford to lose this job. The other jobs, the 2 other part-time positions she held, cleaning offices downtown on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, and babysitting for the Hendersons 3 nights a week, barely covered rent and electricity. This job at Rose's was the pillar. Without it, everything collapsed. She had $34 left. This was all the money in the world she possessed. She counted it again in her car, a 2004 Honda Civic that made sounds it was not supposed to make. The engine had started making a grinding noise last week. She did not have money to fix it. She never had money for anything. Her phone buzzed on the seat beside her. 6:51 in the morning. A calendar reminder, Dr. Hassan's office at 10:44 a.m. Oliver's appointment. Oliver was 7 years old. He had her dark eyes and his father's strong jaw, though his father had been dead for 2 years and Oliver was growing up looking more like a stranger every day, becoming someone she did not recognize. He was a good boy. Quiet. He got tired easily. He complained about his chest sometimes, said it felt like there was something in there that did not fit right, something pressing against his ribs. 3 months ago, his school nurse noticed he was not keeping up with the other children during gym class. By the time they got to a cardiologist, the verdict was already being written. Congenital heart condition. The words meant nothing and everything. The waiting room at Dr. Hassan's office smelled like hand sanitizer and fear. Elena sat beside Oliver, who was swinging his legs, not quite reaching the floor. He was drawing on a scrap of paper she had brought from work, a drawing of a house with windows like eyes and a door like a mouth. His drawings always looked vaguely sad, even when he said they were happy. Dr. Hassan came in with a folder. He was kind, which made it worse somehow. Cruelty she could have fought. Kindness made her want to dissolve. The valve is not developing properly, he said, pulling up images on his computer. Here, you see? The narrowing. It's restricting blood flow. He looked at Oliver. Hi there, buddy. You've been working hard, haven't you? Your heart has been working very hard. Oliver nodded. He was 6 years old, but he understood suffering the way children who hurt understand it, not intellectually, but in the marrow. Dr. Hassan turned back to Elena. We need to do the replacement surgery. I won't sugarcoat this, waiting much longer is dangerous. The condition could become irreversible. How much time? Elena's voice sounded small, even to herself. 7 days. I want him in surgery within 7 days. The room was very quiet. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to stop. The cost, Elena said. Not a question. A statement. Dr. Hassan slid a paper across the desk. $65,000. The hospital requires half up front. We can discuss payment plans, but honestly, with a condition this urgent, they typically need to see collateral or. Elena did not hear the rest. $65,000. The number was so large it stopped making sense. It became abstract, like trying to imagine the distance to the sun, or how many grains of sand were on a beach. It was not a number that existed in her world. Her world was $17 tips and $22 in her pocket, and whether she could afford to buy milk this week or if she could stretch the powder formula one more day. Is there a charity program? Her hands were shaking. She clasped them together. Some, but with the timeline. What if I sell my car? Your car is worth maybe $2,000-3,000. What if she sold her body? The thought arrived before she could stop it. She pushed it away. Not yet. Never yet. But the fact that it had arrived, that her mind had already gone there, meant that she was running out of time in more ways than one. She took Oliver's hand. His small fingers wrapped around hers with surprising strength. That night, Elena did not sleep. She lay in the darkness of her bedroom and did the math in every direction. If she worked double shifts, if she picked up extra babysitting, if she sold everything she owned that had any value. The math never changed. She was $43,000 short, with 7 days counting down. She thought about Oliver sleeping in the next room. About his chest, about something inside him that was not right, about the idea that her son could simply stop. That heart stop. That people stop. She got out of bed and walked to his room. He was sleeping with his mouth open, his favorite stuffed dog tucked under his arm. The room was cold. She pulled his blanket up higher, careful not to wake him. His breathing sounded normal. Tonight. This one night, his heart was still beating, and that was something. 8 days later, on a November night when the rain fell like a curse, Elena's Honda made a grinding sound that was worse than all the others combined. She was driving home from her late shift at Rosie's, her hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, doing the mental math again. It had become her default state, the background noise of her mind. The car coughed. Then again. Then the engine gave out entirely. She coasted to the shoulder of the highway north of the city, where the streetlights had already been swallowed by darkness. The rain came down so hard that the world became unfocused, like someone had smeared the sky with a wet hand. She could not see the road behind her or in front of her. She sat in the car for 5 minutes, then 10, watching other vehicles pass without slowing. A truck with mud on its sides. 2 sedans. An SUV that slowed for a moment, then sped up again. No one was stopping for a woman alone on the highway at 11:41 at night. She got out. The rain soaked through her clothes in seconds. She was wearing her work clothes still, black pants and a pink Rose's diner shirt, the uniform of someone who had no one. She raised her hand, hoping. A car passed. Then another. She was alone on the highway shoulder, shivering, when she felt something different in the air. A sound first, engines, multiple engines, moving in formation. 3 sets of headlights cut through the rain, so bright they turned the darkness into something solid. 3 black SUVs, pristine, expensive, the kind of vehicles that had never seen a pothole or a speck of dirt. They moved like something inevitable, like something that had already decided what it was going to do. They slowed. Then stopped. Men emerged from the vehicles, moving with the precision of people trained to move with precision. They wore suits that cost more than everything Elena had ever owned. The rain fell on them and they did not seem to notice. Their eyes swept across the highway, across Elena, and something in their faces shifted. Then the back door of the center SUV opened, and he stepped out. Giovanni Ferraro was tall, 6'3", maybe taller in the rain, in the dark, in the way he carried himself like a man who had never been told no. He was broad-shouldered in a way that suggested both power and control, the kind of build that came from intention, from discipline. His hair was dark with silver at the temples, like storm clouds with lightning running through them. He wore a coat of charcoal cashmere that hung like it had been tailored to his exact body, a coat that probably cost more than Elena's annual salary. But it was his face that stopped her thinking. There was a scar running from his left eye down to his cheekbone, a thin white line that split his face like a crack in marble. His eyes were the color of a winter sky, and they were looking directly at her. She did not move. She could not move. Giovanni studied her with the careful attention someone gives to a puzzle. His men stood behind him, waiting, their hands relaxed at their sides but present, like dogs that knew a command was coming. Elena was shaking. The rain was cold, but that was not why she was shaking. She realized she was still holding something in her hand. The photograph. She had taken it from her bag before the car died, had been staring at it in the darkness as if prayer could be transmitted through paper and ink. It was her husband. Marcus. In his army uniform, taken the month before he was deployed. The month before an IED took him, and with him, the entire structure of her life. The photograph was worn soft at the edges from her holding it. The colors were fading. And clutched in her other hand was a piece of paper with Oliver's name and his appointment time, written in her own desperate handwriting, as if writing it down made it more real, made the deadline more solid. She looked up at Giovanni Ferraro and did not think about fear. She thought about Oliver. She whispered the only word that mattered, the only word that had mattered for 7 days straight. Oliver? Giovanni's face did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. Something cold and ancient and familiar, like he recognized the sound of desperation the way another drowning person recognizes another drowning person. The scar on his jaw seemed to darken in the rain. He took off his coat. The cashmere coat that was worth more than her life, he unwrapped it from his shoulders and draped it across her, and his men made a sound, the smallest sound, the sound of shock barely contained. "Get her inside," Giovanni said. His voice was like thunder, like something that moved through the air and changed the pressure of the world. "Get her warm." Tony and Nino, the 2 men standing closest to him, the ones who had served him for 15 years without question, exchanged a look they could not explain. In all the years they had known him, they had never seen him remove his coat for anyone. They had never seen him speak to a stranger with anything other than cold calculation. They had certainly never seen him look at a woman the way he was looking at this one. Elena found herself in the back of the middle SUV before she could understand how she got there. The interior was all dark leather and soft light. Giovanni sat across from her, close enough that she could smell something like cedar and smoke, something expensive and dangerous. "Your son," he said. "His name is Oliver." She nodded. She was trembling too much to speak. "Tell me what happened." And so she did. She told him about the heart condition, about the 7-day deadline that had already passed, about the $65,000 that might as well have been $65 million. She told him about working double shifts and eating leftovers from the diner garbage and about the way Oliver got tired when he played. She told him about her dead husband and about being alone and about the moment 3 days ago when she realized she might have to watch her son die because she did not have enough money. She did not cry. Something in her had learned not to cry a long time ago. Giovanni listened without moving. His face was stone, but his eyes were a storm. When she finished, the rain was pounding on the roof of the SUV like it was trying to break through. The world outside was just darkness and water, and inside was just warmth and this man with a scar and the feeling that everything had changed. "Where is your son now?" he asked. "Home. With a neighbor. Mrs. Chen watches him nights when I work. We will go get him." Elena blinked. "What? You will give me an address. We will go to your home, collect your son, and you will both come with me." The way he said it, it was not a suggestion. It was the kind of statement a person made when they had never been refused. When the word no had never actually applied to them. "I don't understand," Elena said. Giovanni leaned forward. The scar on his face caught the light. 23 years ago, I lost a child. A daughter. She was stillborn. The nursery in my house is exactly as it was the day she should have been born. I have not changed a single thing. Not one. His voice did not break. But something in it did, something so deep and fractured that Elena felt it in her own chest. "I am going to help you," he said. "And then you will never be alone again." He did not know that the woman he was helping had already been marked. That somewhere in the city, in an office that overlooked the harbor, a man and a woman were having a conversation about her, about how to use her, about how to destroy everything she was becoming. He did not know that the danger he thought he was protecting her from was already inside his house, wearing a familiar face, moving through the rooms of his empire like a blade. By morning, everything would change. But first, there was only the rain, and the convoy moving through the night, and Elena wrapped in a cashmere coat that smelled like storm and power, finally, for the first time in 300 days, not alone. The stone lodge appeared through the sleet like something from another world, massive and isolated, its windows glowing amber against the November darkness. Elena pressed her forehead to the cold SUV window and watched the trees disappear behind them, nothing but white emptiness and the sound of chains on tires grinding through snow. The convoy had driven for 3 hours from that empty highway. 3 hours north of Philadelphia, away from everything she knew. The lodge loomed larger as they approached. Dark wood and slate stone, a fireplace flickering visible through tall windows, surrounded by pine forest so dense it seemed to swallow light. Giovanni Ferraro stepped out first, his cashmere coat moving like water around him, worth more than a year of her old rent. He did not look back at her. Inside, the lodge was all leather and shadow, a fire roaring in a massive hearth, but the warmth did not reach the walls. Everything spoke of wealth and isolation. Marco and Enzo flanked Giovanni as he turned to Elena, his face unreadable. "You and your son will stay here," he said, his voice flat, like a door closing. "Until I decide what to do with you." Elena nodded. She did not ask why. She did not ask anything. She had learned long ago that gratitude was safer than questions. The guest room was larger than her entire apartment. White linens, a view of nothing but dark woods and falling snow. Elena sat on the edge of the bed and counted her breaths until morning came. Oliver arrived the next day in the back seat of a black sedan, pale and small, his 7-year-old frame swallowed by the car seat. Elena ran down the lodge steps before the car fully stopped, her worn shoes slipping on snow. She wrapped her son in her arms and felt his ribs, counted them the way a mother counts to make sure nothing is broken. His pulse fluttered against her palm like something trapped. "Mama, this house is so big," Oliver whispered. Giovanni stood in the doorway watching them. Marco exchanged a look with Nino. In 15 years neither man had seen the boss watch anything with that expression. Something like recognition. Something like grief. That night, Giovanni stood alone in the hallway outside the nursery door at the end of the corridor. His hand hung at his side. The doorknob was directly in front of him, brass and cold. He had not opened that door in 23 years. The moment his fingers touched the metal, something in his chest fractured. He pulled his hand back and walked away. Days passed in the lodge like snow accumulating, slowly, then all at once. Elena woke at 5 a.m. every morning. She made breakfast she barely tasted. She read to Oliver in the sunroom while the wind threw itself against the windows. She held him when fever came and went. She watched the clock. Always the clock. One morning, she found Giovanni in the kitchen alone. She had learned his patterns when he was alone, when the men were gone. Her voice shook when she asked, "Could I borrow money?" "For Oliver's surgery." $65,000. "I would repay you, I would work, I would." Giovanni did not look at her. He simply left the room. The silence that followed was heavier than any word. But at night, Elena moved differently. When the house fell silent and the staff retreated to distant rooms, she slipped out of the guest quarters. Security cameras tracked her. She did not know this. She did not know that Giovanni sat in his study at 2:06 a.m., watching footage of her whispering urgently into her phone, her voice barely a breath. He said he would help. "Yes. I am inside. I don't have much time." She did not know that his jaw tightened with each passing second. She did not know that Tony stood in the doorway saying words like betrayal and leverage and elimination. What Elena did not know was that her desperation had made her visible to someone far more dangerous than Giovanni Ferraro. Derek Collins arrived on the morning of the 4th day. He was Giovanni's nephew, 32 years old, with expensive tailoring and a smile that had never meant anything kind. He shook snow from his coat in the foyer like he owned the place, like he had always owned it. His eyes found Elena in the hallway within moments. He cornered her in the kitchen when she was folding clean linens. The isolation of the lodge suddenly felt like a trap. Derek leaned against the counter, his shadow falling across her face. "So you are the charity case my uncle is keeping," he said. His voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of someone who had never heard the word no. "How much are you charging him for your company?" Elena stepped backward. Derek followed, closing the space between them like a predator. "Here is what is going to happen," he continued, his tone still light, still conversational. "You are going to tell me everything about Giovanni's business. Security codes. Meeting schedules. Shipment routes. Or I will make certain your son never sees that surgery." Elena's breath stopped. "I don't know anything about his business." Derek's hand shot out and wrapped around her wrist. His grip was not painful yet, but the promise of pain was there, hanging in the air like a blade. "Then you will learn." He released her and walked away, leaving her trembling beside the sink. That same afternoon, another car arrived through the snow. Evelyn Blackwell emerged like a predator recognizing another predator's territory. She was 53, with silver threaded through dark hair, wearing clothes that probably cost what Elena made in a month. Diamonds caught the light at her throat and wrists. She found Elena alone in the hallway, folding more linens, always more linens, as if keeping busy could keep her safe. Evelyn circled her slowly. "You poor thing," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Did you really believe a man like Giovanni Ferraro would want someone like you? Look at yourself. Stained clothes. Rough hands. Desperation in your eyes like a second skin. She stepped closer. You are a project to him. A charity case. The moment you stop being useful, the moment he tires of playing savior, you will be gone. Elena did not move. Did not speak. I am going to make certain everyone knows exactly what you are, Evelyn continued, her smile cutting. A gold-digging waitress using her sick child to manipulate a powerful man. By the time I am finished with you, you will have nothing. Not even his pity. Elena's voice emerged thin and steady. I am not using anyone. Evelyn laughed, a sound like breaking glass. We will see. That evening, Oliver's fever returned. Not the gentle warmth of before, but something that made his small body shake. Elena sat beside his bed in the darkness, checking his pulse every few minutes, counting the beats like a prayer. She had no money. She had no options. She had only this boy and 4 days left and the terrifying mathematics of a heart that was failing. Giovanni appeared in the doorway with his personal physician. The examination took 10 minutes. When it was finished, the doctor stepped back and nodded. Just a cold. The boy is strong. But the surgery should be moved up. 2 more days of exposure and we take the risk. Giovanni left the room and was gone for 7 minutes. When he returned, his phone was already in his hand. His voice, when he spoke, was absolute. I want the best cardiac surgeon on the East Coast. I do not care about wait lists. I do not care about scheduling. Philadelphia Children's Hospital. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. surgery. He hung up. The line went dead. He told Elena, the surgery is scheduled. She broke then. The tears came like a dam failing, everything she had held together for 3 years, for 300 days, for every shift at the diner, every stiff tip, every night counting numbers that would never add up. Oliver reached for Giovanni's hand. Thank you, Mr. Ferraro, the boy whispered. Giovanni knelt beside the bed. For just a moment, the Mafia boss disappeared, and what remained was a man who had stood in front of a nursery door he could not open for 23 years. He smoothed Oliver's dark hair back from his forehead. You are going to be fine, he said. His voice was solid, like a vow. I promise you. You are going to be fine. But in his study that same night, Giovanni watched the security footage again. Elena at 2:22 a.m., slipping from her room, phone pressed to her ear, he said yes. I am inside his house. I can get the codes. Her voice was urgent, desperate, damning. Giovanni's hand moved to the gun in his desk drawer. His jaw was stone. Tony stood in the doorway. You want me to handle it, boss? Giovanni did not answer immediately. The snow fell outside the tall windows, erasing the world into white silence. Finally, he said, watch her. And find out who she is talking to. Footsteps retreated down the hallway. The fireplace crackled. And Elena, in her room down the corridor, made one more phone call, whispering words that would change everything. The stone garage was cold. Winter cold. The kind that made your lungs burn when you breathed. Snow fell outside the open bay doors in silent sheets, erasing the world into white nothing, and Elena stood alone among the shadows of parked cars worth more than everything she had ever owned, running through scenarios in her mind that all ended the same way, with Oliver not making it to that hospital. The footsteps came from behind her first. Then Derek's voice, smooth like oil, dangerous like a blade, time's up, Elena. She turned. Derek Collins stood in an Armani coat the color of midnight, his face beautiful and cruel in the way that expensive things often are. He was Giovanni's nephew, 32 years old, with his uncle's dark eyes but none of his restraint. Everything about him said entitlement. Everything about him said he believed the world belonged to him simply because he had been born into the right family. I told you, Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. I don't have the codes. I don't have anything. Derek stepped closer. His footsteps echoed off the concrete. One step, then another, each one deliberate, calculated to make her small. You have had 3 weeks, Elena. 3 weeks inside this house, in his confidence, in his bed. I am not in his bed. Not yet. Derek pulled out his phone. His thumb moved across the screen. He turned it toward her. A hospital admission form. Oliver's name. His date of birth. His condition, congenital heart valve stenosis. I have access to everything. Every hospital file. Every insurance document. Every record. He smiled. Accidents happen to sick children all the time. 1 medication error. 1 anesthesia complication. Tragic, really. He would be dead before his mother realized what happened. Elena's breath stopped. Derek continued, his voice dropping lower. I need the security codes to his study. Safe locations. Account numbers. Names of his operations. You get me that information by tomorrow night, or your son dies on that operating table. And no one will ever know it was not an accident. She could not move. Could not breathe. The cold of the garage seeped into her bones and turned her blood to ice. Everything she had done, every lie she had told Giovanni, every night she snuck from her room to make phone calls in whispers, all of it had been for this moment. To protect Oliver. To save him. And now the one person who could actually save him was being used as leverage against her? Her knees buckled. She slid down the nearest wall until she was sitting on the concrete floor, her back pressed against cold metal, her hands shaking so badly she could not make them stop. The breath came in gasps. In and out. In and out. The snow fell outside and the world was white and empty and she was alone. Maybe she should just tell Derek something. Make something up. Feed him false information. Maybe that would buy her time. Maybe that would keep Oliver alive long enough to have the surgery, and then she could figure out the rest. Maybe she could run. Take Oliver and disappear into the night like she had disappeared so many times before. Maybe. But then she remembered. Giovanni kneeling beside Oliver's bed. His hand, strong and scarred, smoothing the boy's dark hair back from his forehead. His voice, deep and solid like an oath, you are going to be fine. I promise you. You are going to be fine. She had heard that promise. Oliver had heard it. And something in it had felt true in a way that nothing had felt true in years. Not because Giovanni was a good man, she knew what he was, what he did, the darkness that lived in his chest. But because he had made a vow. And men like Giovanni Ferraro did not break vows. Elena took a breath. She straightened. She looked up at Derek. No, she said. Derek's face twisted. His hand came up, and for a moment she thought he would hit her. You stupid. The garage door rolled open. The sound was thunder. Deep and mechanical and absolute. Giovanni Ferraro stood in the doorway. Behind him, Tony and Nino. Behind them, 8 more men in black suits, moving like ghosts, like they had materialized from the snow itself. Their hands hung at their sides. Casual. Ready. Lethal. Derek went pale. The color drained from his face so completely that he looked suddenly young, suddenly terrified, suddenly like the spoiled boy he was beneath the expensive coat. Uncle, he stammered. She is lying. I was just. Giovanni's voice was ice. You threatened a child under my protection. In my house. In front of my walls. He nodded once, a small gesture, and Tony and Nino moved forward. Derek backed away, his hands up, his voice rising into panic. Please, please, I'm family, I'm your nephew, please. They grabbed him. He struggled for a moment, then collapsed into sobs, trembling like a cornered animal caught in a trap with no escape. His expensive coat was torn. His face was wet. The boy who had believed the world belonged to him was learning, in that moment, that the world belonged to men like Giovanni Ferraro, and he had just made a catastrophic mistake. You stopped being family when you touched her, Giovanni said quietly. They dragged Derek toward the house. His feet scraped against the concrete. His begging echoed off the stone walls and then faded into the white silence of the falling snow. Elena stood alone in the garage. She was shaking. Not from cold anymore. From something else. Something that felt almost like relief, but sharper. Like a blade. Giovanni turned back to her. He moved toward her slowly, deliberately, and when he reached her, he did not say anything for a long moment. He simply stood in front of her, this man who had nearly destroyed her, and she stood in front of him, this woman he had nearly destroyed, and between them was the weight of every misunderstanding, every suspicion, every wrong conclusion built on incomplete information. You were never in danger, Giovanni said finally. I knew what Derek was doing. I knew Evelyn was involved. I was building the case. Elena looked up at him. The snow fell behind him, framing his dark hair, his scarred face, his eyes that had looked at her with such confusion and suspicion just hours ago. Then why didn't you tell me? He hesitated. Because I thought you were working with them. I thought you were betraying me. I watched the security footage. You were making phone calls in the middle of the night. Sneaking from your room. Meeting someone. Elena's face showed shock, then understanding. She reached into her pocket. Her hands were still shaking. She pulled out a small cloth bag, the kind you find at gas stations and dollar stores, the cheap kind sold by registers next to candy and lottery tickets. I was making these, she whispered. She opened the bag. Inside were bracelets. Handmade bracelets. Cheap plastic beads in bright colors, purple and gold and blue, strung together on fraying string. Elementary school craft fair quality. Children's work. I was making these to sell. $5 a piece if I was lucky. For extra money. For Oliver's medicine. For the things your generosity could not cover, because I am still his mother and I still needed to provide for him. She looked down at the bracelets in her shaking hands. I was ashamed. I did not want you to see me like that. Desperate. Pathetic. Selling trinkets like a child playing at business. I wanted you to think I was strong. I wanted you to think I had everything under control. Giovanni stared at the bracelets. At the child's beads. At the fraying string. At this woman who had been so focused on protecting her son that she had taken desperate measures in the dark while pretending to be fine in the daylight. The misunderstanding that had nearly cost everything. The suspicion that had almost destroyed them both, built on the fact that she was too proud to ask for help and he was too wounded to believe kindness could exist without ulterior motive. You are not pathetic, Giovanni said. His voice was different now. Gentler. Like something had broken open inside him and was bleeding out. You are the strongest person I have ever met. Elena began to cry. Not the gasping, desperate sobs of fear. But the tears of someone who had been carrying weight alone for so long that the moment someone else reached out to help her carry it, her knees buckled under the relief. Giovanni reached for her? He did not touch her. He simply stood close enough that she could feel his presence, solid and real and there. 36 hours later, Oliver's surgery was successful. Giovanni waited in the hospital corridor for 8 hours. He paced. He could not sit. He moved from the waiting room to the hallway to the window overlooking Philadelphia and back again, his men scattered around the hospital in tailored suits that made nurses nervous and security guards careful not to make eye contact. When the surgeon emerged from the operating room and nodded, Giovanni's knees nearly buckled. The man had not said a single word. Just a nod. And it meant Oliver would live. The boy would wake up. His heart would beat strong and steady for decades. Elena was allowed in recovery first. She held Oliver's small hand, his chest rising and falling under the surgical bandages, the monitors beeping steady and regular and blessed. His eyes were closed. His breathing was even. He was alive. Giovanni stood in the doorway, watching. Watching this woman who had nearly cost him everything hold the hand of the child who had cost her everything. Watching the rise and fall of the boy's chest. Watching the machines that said he was going to be okay. Oliver's eyes opened. Cloudy at first, then clearing. He was groggy, drugged, exhausted from the surgery, but conscious. His small hand gripped Elena's hand tighter. "Mama," the boy whispered. Elena froze. Oliver had never called her that. His birth mother had died when he was 2 years old, and Elena was actually his aunt who had taken him in after his mother passed, but he had never used that word. Not in all the years she had raised him. Something in his small, drugged mind made the connection now, in this moment of waking after his heart had been opened and repaired, after the doctors had literally fixed what was broken inside him. "Yes, baby," Elena whispered. "Mama is here." Oliver's eyes found Giovanni in the doorway. "Papa." The word hung in the recovery room like a prayer. Giovanni could not move. His entire body had gone still. In the hallway behind him, Tony and Nino exchanged a look neither had seen on their boss's face in the 15 years they had known him. Oliver, 7 years old, drowsy and brave from surgery, said it again, "Papa." Giovanni walked to the bed. He took the boy's other small hand, and for the first time in 23 years, since the day he had closed the nursery door and never opened it again, the Mafia boss cried. The tears came quietly. They ran down his scarred cheeks. His shoulders did not shake. His jaw did not clench. He simply stood there, holding Oliver's hand, holding Elena's hand, and let the tears fall like rain, like snow, like forgiveness, like love finally permitted to exist after decades of being locked away. Oliver's eyes were already closing again, the anesthesia pulling him back toward sleep. His small voice was barely a whisper, "Don't go. Don't leave." "Never," Giovanni said. And he meant it. He meant it in a way that changed the architecture of his entire life in a single syllable. 3 months had passed since the blizzard. February cold pressed against the mountain lodge windows, but inside, the fireplace burned with steady warmth. Elena Santos stood in the kitchen, her hands no longer trembling when she reached for a glass. Oliver sat at the breakfast table, his small chest rising and falling without the labored breathing that had haunted her nightmares. The surgical scar was already fading. The boy was healing. She was healing too, though in ways she could not quite name. Giovanni entered without announcement, the way he always did now, not as a visitor to her life but as someone who belonged here. His tailored charcoal shirt was open at the collar. The gold watch caught the kitchen light. He was no longer the man in the rain on that November highway. And Elena was no longer the desperate woman clutching a photograph of a dead husband. "Good morning," he said, and kissed the top of Oliver's head. The boy did not flinch. He never flinched anymore. "Papa, can we go to the lake today?" Mama said maybe. Oliver's voice carried no memory of the before times, the hospital corridors, the fear. Children had this mercy, they could move forward. Giovanni glanced at Elena. She nodded. 3 months of mornings like this, and she still could not quite believe they were real. "We can go," Giovanni said. "But first, I need to show you both something." He took Elena's hand. His palm was warm, scarred from decades of a life she was only beginning to understand. Oliver followed, carrying a wooden block shaped like a house. The three of them moved through the lodge toward the hallway Elena had never explored, the corridor with the locked door at the far end. Giovanni had mentioned it once, weeks ago, in the dark. A room he had not opened in 23 years. A room where he had locked away his grief and welded the door shut with silence. He stopped in front of the pale oak door. His jaw tightened. For a moment, his entire body seemed to turn to stone. "This is where I need your help," he said quietly. He unlocked it. Inside was a nursery suspended in time. White crib with iron railings. Stuffed animals, a brown bear, a yellow duck, a rabbit with one ear bent, arranged on shelves so carefully they seemed to be waiting. A mobile hung motionless above where a baby would have slept. and painted on the pale yellow wall in careful letters, Sophia. Elena's hand rose to her mouth. "My daughter," Giovanni said. His voice did not break. It was steadier than his hands. "She was stillborn. My wife, Maria, died bringing her into the world. Both of them. The same night." He paused. The sound of his breathing was the only thing in the room. "I closed this door and I did not open it again. I could not look at the empty crib. I could not see her name on the wall. So I built an empire instead. I built walls so high and so thick that nothing could get through them. Not love. Not hope. Not the possibility that life could mean anything other than control and power and the constant, exhausting work of not feeling." Oliver looked up at the name on the wall. "What does it say?" "That is the name of my daughter," Giovanni said. "She never got to live. She never got to grow. She never got to call me Papa the way you do." The boy was quiet for a moment. Then he reached up and took Giovanni's free hand. "Now you have me. And I say Papa." Something shifted in Giovanni's chest. Elena watched it happen, watched the last locked room of his heart open. "Yes," Giovanni said. "Now I have you." That evening, the three of them sat by the fire. Oliver built with blocks on the rug while Elena and Giovanni occupied the leather sofa. Outside, the February wind rattled the glass. Inside, it was warm. "What happens now?" Elena asked quietly. The question she had been afraid to voice. "Derek is in prison. Evelyn is awaiting trial. The threats have ended. The people who wanted to hurt us, they're gone. Does the protection end? Do I need to leave?" Giovanni turned to face her fully. His dark eyes held hers with an intensity that made her throat tight. "No," he said. "You do not leave. Not unless you want to. But I am just a waitress. I was nothing before you found me on that highway. I am nobody, Giovanni. I always have been. You are not nobody." He took both her hands. His voice dropped, became something she had never heard from him before, vulnerable, almost fragile. "You came into my life and you saw all of me. The grief. The anger. The man I was pretending to be because feeling anything else would destroy me. You saw that and you did not run. You stayed. You loved my nephew as your son, not because you had to, but because your heart is made of courage. You showed me that strength does not come from how many men follow your orders or how much money sits in your accounts. Strength comes from showing up in the dark and refusing to be afraid." Elena's eyes burned with tears she had not expected. "I want you to stay," he continued. "Not as someone I am protecting. As someone I cannot live without. As the woman who gave me back my life." Oliver looked up from his blocks. "Are you going to kiss her, Papa?" Giovanni laughed. A real laugh, warm and genuine. Elena had never heard that sound before. It transformed his entire face. He stood, pulled Elena to her feet, and kissed her. His hand cupped the back of her head gently, as if she might disappear. When he pulled away, his forehead touched hers. "Yes," he said. "I am going to kiss her." Oliver cheered and threw his blocks in the air like confetti. Spring arrived at the mountain lodge as February melted away. The snow that had buried everything gave way to mud, then grass. Elena planted flowers in the garden while Oliver helped, or attempted to help, mostly digging holes in the wrong places and announcing his theories about what would grow from them. She wore Giovanni's sweater because hers was too thin, and it fell past her hips and smelled like him, like expensive cologne and something underneath it, just him. Giovanni watched from the porch with Tony and Nino. The two lieutenants had been here often in the past months, overseeing the transition. The empire was changing. Businesses were being legitimized, restructured. Foundations were being created in Elena's name. "Never thought I would see the day, boss," Tony said. He was a large man with silver threading his dark hair, and his voice carried something like wonder. "Neither did I," Giovanni replied. The camera could pull back here, could show them all three, Giovanni and Elena and Oliver, a family built from rescue and ruin, thriving in the afternoon light. Elena would look back at Giovanni and smile. He would smile back. Oliver would run toward them both, shouting something about the flowers, and they would catch him between them, held in an embrace that felt like safety made physical. The little girl who gave a rescue signal, Oliver reaching out in hospital darkness, his small voice calling him Papa, had changed everyone's life forever. Some rescues work both directions. The man who saved the boy saved himself in the process. This is what the story had been building toward all along, not triumph, but transformation. Not the destruction of enemies alone, but the construction of something real. Giovanni thought he was rescuing a desperate woman on a highway in November rain. What he did not understand was that she was rescuing him too. From grief. From isolation. From a life lived behind walls so thick that nothing could penetrate them. Oliver's tiny hand calling him Papa broke something that 23 years of power could not touch. Elena's courage, surviving on $34 and stained aprons and orthopedic shoes worn through at the heel, showed him what strength actually means. Derek and Evelyn tried to destroy them both and ended up in federal cells facing 40 years each, because cruelty always devours itself in the end. But Giovanni and Elena and Oliver, they built something cruelty could never touch. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only love can do that. When you see someone drowning, you have two choices. Walk past or reach out your hand. Giovanni reached out his hand on that November highway and found that the woman he saved was already saving him back. Family is not about blood. Family is about who shows up in the storm. Family is about who refuses to let you remain locked away. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that rescue works both directions. Subscribe to this channel because tomorrow we have another story that will break you open and put you back together. Drop a comment telling us, have you ever rescued someone who ended up rescuing you? We read every single one. We wish all of you watching this video good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. No matter how hard life gets, remember that after the rain, the sky clears. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We will see you again in the next video.